during a visit by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the first by a Japanese PM for more than a decade. I spoke to the Trade Minister Andrew Robb earlier this morning and began by asking him about Labor's concerns over the lack of detail that's been released on the FTA.
Well, it'll be put on the table, I think, on the 15th of July and, for all to see. This is consistent with past practice, whether you're talking about Labor governments or coalition governments. This is what we've always done. The Parliament then it goes to the Treaties Committee, which it debates and makes its determination. The Parliament has its opportunity. So there's nothing different to what's happened before under Labor, so I'm not sure really what their point is.
In terms of the free trade deal, a number of farm groups wanted you to go further. They're not happy with it. Is that inevitable in any sort of deal done between two countries? Well,
look, this is by far the most ambitious trade deal Japan has ever done. On top of that, we have struck a deal ahead of all of our competitors. Now, that hasn't happened too often in the past, I've got to say. So we've got a big advantage on two counts. If we'd waited to get the 100% deal, we'd be waiting many more years. We've got an outstanding deal on a whole range of agricultural products. Some others we could have done better, but we've got the TPP coming up and we expect to do better in other areas. But on balance, this is, as I said, it's by far the best agreement Japan has ever struck with any country, and it's going to add literally tens and tens of billions of dollars to Australia's revenue and hundreds of thousands of jobs in the years ahead.
You mentioned the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership that includes, I think, a dozen countries, including the United States. So under that arrangement, if that is struck and Japan agrees to greater concessions in agriculture, will they automatically kick in for us too?
Yes, well, it's not automatic. The clauses are not there for automatic, but we've been negotiating with them in good faith. All of these things build trust, and my sense of the negotiations we've been having with Japan in the context of the Trans-Pacific Partnership mean that we will get the greater benefits that might accrue to others.
The investment side of this, how significant is that? Because of course Japanese investment has been a big part of the Australian economy for a number of decades, but does this open up even more, the FTA that it's going to be signed today?
All of these things, this gives us an even broader relationship for the Japanese into Australia and for Australia into Japan. Services open up, the opportunity for companies to set up under Japanese law, all of these issues free up the relationship. This will mean more investment, because more trade inevitably means more investment. History tells us that, and with the increased threshold from 248 million to over $1 billion before deals have to go before the Foreign Investment Review Board, that will be a further stimulus to investment between our two countries.
There's also going to be a defence technology transfer agreement. What's the significance of that, and how much are we talking in terms of dollars in that space? That's not
an agreement that I've been dealing with. I'd rather wait and see the final discussions between the two Prime Ministers today, but clearly it will advance our trade between the two countries again. And the whole thing is too, all of these things, the more agreements you strike, the more trust you build, the more linkages you develop. And this trust issue is very important, and all of these business people that are coming with Prime Minister Abe, they are people who are making decisions about future investment. Japan is growing again, and this deal comes at a very sweet time in that regard, because it will help us secure a significant part of that growth out of Japan.
You talk about building trust, and I guess that's a fair assessment between Australia and Japan, but inevitably when you're talking about enhanced cooperation, and particularly defence cooperation with Tokyo, Beijing is going to have concerns. Are you worried about the implications there, particularly when you're in the final stages of trying to secure a free trade agreement with China?
No, I'm not. Look, the fact is that Australia is now so economically tied to all three countries in the region, South Korea, Japan and China, that it's in our interest, it dictates that we have to have strong security relationships with all three. And in fact, if you look at it, that's what's been occurring. We have been enhancing our security relationships and involvement with all three countries.
Have you heard what Hillary Clinton had to say on this recently in relation to our economic ties with China? That it could essentially, that we might have to back away from that as part of our relationship with the United States. Do you give that any credence?
I disagree. I mean, I disagree with that. I mean, it's in our interest to have peace in the region, and we're so tied to all three countries. 51% of all of our exports now go to either Korea, Japan or China. We have to have strong relationships with all three, and the best way to get peace in the region is to have strong security arrangements with all three countries.
Finally, on another issue, it's out of your portfolio, but I just want to get your thoughts on it as a Cabinet Minister. The High Court injunction on the transfer of asylum seekers, that has very big implications, doesn't it, for the government's border protection policy?
Well, it's before the court, so let's see. Look, the bottom line is that, one, we've done what we said we'd do, that is stop the boats, and two, we can assure every Australian that everything we're doing is consistent with international law and is safe. And we have stopped people drowning at sea. And bear in mind, over the last 6 years, under Labor's policies, over 1,000 people died at sea. And, you know, that was a humanitarian disgrace, disaster, and we have stopped that. We've stopped the boats as we said we would.
Minister, thanks for your time.
It's my pleasure.
So we'll have more on that.